One of my favorite memories at my house was our Christmas tree. Every Christmas, the Christmas tree turns, and we had this stand that would play Christmas carols, and it would go round and round. And as it did, if you shut all the lights off at night, you could lay down under the Christmas tree and look up and see all the weird patterns that the different lights would make on the ceiling as it went around. I grew up doing this in my footy pajamas, laying there with my brothers, looking up at the Christmas tree and the way it bounced the lights. But there was something else. Some of you know that I had lots of brothers and sisters and grew up with a large foster family. And the thing about foster kids is that some of them come for a weekend and some of them come for 10 years. And you don't know when you get them how long they're going to be there. So my family had a room that was just clothes of various sizes. So a child would be dropped off, and you couldn't run out and buy them all clothes because you didn't know if they were going to be picked up by the end of the weekend. You had no idea what was going to happen. So in order to not be stuck in a situation where you bought a lot of clothes and then the child kept taking them, you're going to have a real problem with that, right? You're going to lose money. So we would have this storage room. Well, the other thing that we did was we would take pictures of the children and put them on, they were on these Gerber lids from Gerber, little Gerber food, baby food. And we'd hang them on the tree. And then at Christmas time, as the tree went round and round, you could see all the children of Christmas past. Kind of, the ghost of Christmas past. And the crazy part was, as we did that, we would have like stories, as we would tell stories about all the children that went by and everything. And I always remember that that tree represented kind of our shared family experiences. It was a fake tree, so it looked the same every year. But it was sort of a shared family experience. We could talk about each of the children and what they were like and who they were and how we remember them. Here's the thing. Behind chapter 25, we're going to look at Abraham's death and the story of the gathering of the family. And we're going to do that in such a way as to kind of tell the story of what happens in each of their lives. Let me cut through a lot of words and say what I'm trying to say. There's a simple principle behind chapter 25, and that is the family is intended to be God's learning laboratory. That is its intent. God intended that the family be the place where there would be a life learning laboratory, and he set it up. Now, that means each of the people I want to look at, I want to ask, what are they learning? What example do they bring to this life learning lab? And in 25, 1 to 9, I simply want you to write next to it the word Abraham. 25, 1 to 9, Abraham. Then in 25, 11, put Isaac. But next to 11, 25, 11, Isaac, and then put right underneath Isaac also verses 19 to 21. Isaac is 11 plus verses 19 to 21. Then I drop down to verses 19 to 21 and put Isaac in again. Okay, so you can follow what's going on in the story. Now go up. Okay, so what I said was 25 basically 1 to 9 is Abraham, but 25, 11 is Isaac, and under Isaac you put 19 to 21. Then drop down to 19, 21 to 21 and put Isaac in again. So you're blocking off the various stories within the chapter. That's what you're trying to do. This is mechanics just to help you to understand how to study it. Then I want you to go back to 25, 9. Which is technically under Abraham, and put next to verse 9, Ishmael, verse 9, but also verses 12 through 18. Ishmael is 9, and Ishmael is 12 to 18. Then what are we going to do next? We're going to go 12 to 18 and put Ishmael in again, is what we're going to do. And I know it sounds confusing, but it's really not. It's to break up. So far we've got a section on Abraham, a section on Isaac, and now the section on Ishmael, which is 9 and 12 to 18. And then, just so that we don't leave all the girls out, 25, 22, right next to 25, 22, Rebecca. And when you write Rebecca, put 22 to 24, but also 27b and 28. 22 to 24 and 27b to 28. So 27b is just the second half of 27, right? So Rebecca is 22 to 24, 27b to 28. Once we get through the mechanics of this, it starts to get fun, but we got to get the mechanical part broke up. Then go to 25, 25, 25, 25, and put Esau. And that's 25 to 34. And fortunately, Esau is one big chunk. He's not broke up like the others. And what's the balance of the chapter from 26 to 34? Who's that going to be? That'll be Jacob. So Jacob will be 26 to 34. So what I did was I just cut it up into these boxes or cut it up into these parts, and I'm hanging all of these parts on this one theme. The theme will be, this is the life learning laboratory God gave us. Is there value to the family in Scripture? Yes. It's the life learning lab. And when families are fractured, people are fractured. And when people are fractured, civil society breaks down. Welcome to 2014. Because what you have is a civil society of kids that didn't learn to share their blocks, and now they steal each other's stuff. People that didn't understand what love requires of them and relationship requires of them, and they go out into the world and believe that relationships are about what I get, not what I give. Marriages therefore break down, and the cycle continues and gets worse. You're not going to believe me, but this has happened within my lifetime. You can't even imagine a society that I grew up in. But the one I grew up in, a few people got divorces and most people didn't. And people felt ashamed if they did. I know that's almost unheard of in your mind. Because now people treat marriage like it was dating. Oh, we broke up means we got divorced. Because the line of sexual purity doesn't precede the marriage bed, people don't really see a lot. So it's now, it's sex without paper and marriage is sex with paper. There really isn't any big difference. If you can live together and do everything married people do, then the significant moment of marriage is we can keep on doing what we did last Friday night, only now we got a piece of paper, which doesn't have the feel and force of something that happened in heavenly places. Marriages aren't ceremonies. They're primarily a God thing, a change in heaven that's symbolized by a ceremony. So let's come back and take a look at this family. Abraham took another wife, whose name was Keturah. She bore to him Zimrah and Yokshan and Medan and Midian and Ishbak and Shuach. And Yokshan became the father of Sheba and Dedan. And the sons of Dedan were Asherim and Letushim and Leumim. The sons of Midian were Ephah and Epher, Hanoch, Avida, Eldaah, and all these were the sons of Keturah. Now Abraham gave all that he had to Isaac, but to the sons of his concubines, Abraham gave gifts while he was still living and sent them away from his son Isaac eastward to the land east. These are the years of Abraham's life that he lived, 175 years. Abraham breathed his last and died a ripe old age, an old man satisfied with life, and he was gathered to his people. Then his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar the Hittite, facing Mamre. Now stop and look at Abraham for just a minute. When you step back and look at his life, well, let me go one more verse, verse 10, and just say the field which Abraham purchased from the sons of Chet, where Abraham was buried with Sarah, his wife. Two chapters ago, we looked at how Abraham lost the love of his life. And we tried to figure out in that comparison how she had always been with him and his heart was taken away and she was a key player in his life. But here's the thing I want you to notice about Abraham that he models at the end of his life. Let me tell you why I'm telling you this. Most of you are 20 years old and you're going, I got a long life ahead. But you are sitting on a Sunday morning next to somebody who has very few days ahead and most of their days are behind them. So to understand the way to encourage somebody who's much advanced in years is also going to be part of your job. Your job isn't just to know what the Bible says for your life. It's also for you to know how to encourage other people about their life. Okay? Look at verses 1 to 4, and here's what I would put. Abraham continued to intertwine his life with other people. I don't know why it is, but when we get older, we get more drawn within. And all of a sudden, the list of people we see this week all have the word doctor in front of them. I'm going to go Monday to this doctor, Tuesday to that doctor, Wednesday I got this doctor in the morning, that doctor in the evening. Thursday, I got a big day to break out for my doctor. I'm going to go get my nails done. Then I'm going to have my hair done. Then I'm going to go back to the doctor. And what happens is the list of people that we intertwine our life with goes down dramatically. I'm talking about intertwining. I'm not talking about talking to. It's hard for the senior citizen to look at the beauty of your skin and the reality of your youthfulness and find a way to intertwine to your life. They know what you don't. They lived through it. You didn't. They understand things you've not been through. But here's the truth. When they look at life, the number of days ahead is small and the number of days behind is large. And it's hard for them to get energetic to intertwine to your life. The stuff you're involved in doesn't make sense to them. They can't figure out how the remote works. Here's the thing. Look at the first 4 verses here. What you have is Abraham, who is no spring chicken, but he is out getting married and having kids and having bar mitzvahs and brises and parties, and he's just having a life. Let me suggest this. Live until you die. Okay? Don't die before you die. There's an awful lot of people that are walking around that they just look like they died already. And the problem is they don't understand that it doesn't matter how great your past was. That doesn't change your present unless you actively engage and intertwine with people. So here's my encouragement. Verses 1 to 4, one of the things he did was he intertwined his life with other people. Let me say it this way. You must deliberately choose to intertwine your life with other people or you will be an island. This isn't high shelf stuff. In other words, you get friends when you make friends. Okay? How many of you passed through a time in your life when for whatever reason you couldn't find a good friend? Okay? Mine was I lived far away from anybody who was like me. So it was really a simple problem. I mean, I'm probably not the most friendly person in the world anyway, but I can tell you that when no one speaks your language and no one thinks like you, it's really hard to find friends. Here's what I know. He pulled the lever and he did that. Now, look at verses 5 to 7. The other thing he did, besides intertwining his life, was he attended to his legacy. What is a legacy? What we leave behind, right? When I say attended to his legacy, you can wait till you're dead and they yard sale all your stuff at 20 cents on the dollar if you're lucky. And everyone in Sebring will love you because Sebring loves a yard sale. Seriously. They will park all over a neighbor's lawn who's not even involved just to get to the yard sale. They will trample your bushes to get that cheap junk that somebody else has in their yard sale. Here's the truth. The truth is that you can wait till you're gone and they can sell off your stuff, or you can figure out a way to attend to your legacy and care for people while you can see them. My recommendation for seniors in our congregation is always the same thing. Give it to your children while you can see what they do with it. Don't give it to them after you die. If you give them a chunk of what they're going to receive now, you can actually watch what they do, and you can help guide them. By the way, give to the causes that are the legacy causes that you care about. My father cared his whole life, his whole Christian life, about Christian education, and I expect a big chunk of what he has will go to Christian education. Not to me, not to my brothers and sisters, to Christian education. Why? Because he believed in it. You want your legacy statement to be what you believed in, not just people you liked. There's a third thing he does. In verses 8 through 10, Abraham let people know something very important. There's a word that I pick up in verse 8. What is the most important word about his ripe old age? Satisfied. I don't know why, but so many seniors walk around grumpy about life. Whole world's gone to hell. We used to have a good America. People cut their hair and sang good music. They're on the wrong page. If you have a walk with God, today is a new day. I am becoming greener in sap, Psalm 92. New life in Christ. It's not just what it was, it's what it is. You understand why you're so incredibly important to the people in this church? You're important because they want to know if they're passing the baton and it's going anywhere, and you're the representation of where it's going. Welcome to the race. They can look at you and go, look, the message of Jesus isn't dying. Young people want it. And that's what they're excited about. I think it's interesting that we can communicate in our lifestyle as seniors that what is ahead is better than what is behind. Now let's say it this way. As a Christian, is what's ahead better than what's behind? Yes! If you're on your last day on the planet, this is as close to hell as you'll ever get. If you know Jesus, the next day is better. But if you walk around sour about life, you communicate to people that your best days were behind. So there's a deliberate skill you have to learn in aging. Here it is. How do I project the truth that the future is better, not worse, that Jesus wins? The devil doesn't win. Jesus wins. How do I project that? That's going to make you the kind of old person, as you get older, that people are going to want to be around. That, by the way, and giving out candy to kids. That gets a definite thing. Okay, now, let's go on to the next guy. We can retire Abraham after 175 years, and we'll miss him, but we'll see him again, in the future. So let's just retire him and move on to his son. Interesting thing about Isaac, let me just pick up verses 11 and then 19 to 21. I'm going to read those two chunks and then we'll come back and talk about him. It came about after the death of Abraham that God blessed his son Isaac, and Isaac lived in Beer. What is Beer? Well, Lahai Roi. Roi is sees, the God who sees, right? And it says, verse 19, now these are the records of the generations of Isaac, Abram's son. Abraham became the father of Isaac. Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean of Padan Aram, the sister of Lavan or Laban, the Aramean, to be his wife. Isaac, or Yitzhak, or laughter, prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren. And the Lord answered him, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. Now, you see a couple of things here. First, after Abraham was promised, many years later after the promise, when Abraham was about 100 years old, Isaac is born. The next thing I know about his life is that he was, in fact, circumcised on the 8th day. He's the only baby of his mother, according to Genesis 18. So when you think about Isaac, focus for a moment on his life. His wife is Rebekah. His wife was chosen by God. Do you remember the story that we read not long ago before we went to Job? She was chosen by God through a servant, Eleazar of Damascus. And this is the only patriarch that doesn't get a name change. His name was Laughter from the beginning. It was always that. Okay? I just thought that was interesting. All the other patriarchs go through a name change. He doesn't. The other thing is that he's the only one who never left Canaan. He's the only one who didn't go to Egypt. He didn't ever leave the land, and he didn't come from a different land. He's the only one who's landlocked in the promised land. I think what's interesting is he died at 180 years of age, so he's the longest living, okay? By the way, half of his life he lived with his dad. 75 years of his life he lived with his dad. Okay? If he was 40 when he got married, just do the math, you can figure it out. The point is that I think it's interesting that Isaac is in 24, 25, and 26. You'll see Isaac married in 24, and you'll see him in 25 here, and then you'll see him chapter 26. In other words, he's only in 3 chapters of the Bible. So Isaac gets a thin slice of the story. Does it mean he's unimportant? No. It means that God is telling the story, and his role in the story was relatively simple. Now, what are some similarities he had to his dad? Can you pick out one really easily?
His wife was barren.
His wife was barren, and he had to go on behalf. And actually, when you go through his life, you're going to find out not only that, but he's going to go through a famine. He's going to lie to Avimelech, or the guy who's called Prince, and he's going to have a pact made at Beersheba. In other words, there's some things that happen in his life that are very similar to things that happen in Abraham's life. What does that tell you on its surface?
Can kids are like their parents?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, 75 years of his life he lived with his dad, and he had to go through some of the exact same experiences in order to get it. It would be nice if I could tell you, because your parents have gone through this struggle, you will know how to handle whatever. But that's not true. A lot of times parents will go from flat broke and struggle financially to get on their feet. And by the time the children come along, things are happening for them and they've got a little bit more. The children go out and are flat broke and go through the whole cycle again. What you see is Isaac going through the exact same cycle. Okay, there are three ways that I see his model becomes practical for us. First, I want you to look at verse 11. Isaac recalled the provision and direction of God from the past. That is, in verse 11, God blessed his son Isaac. And Isaac lived at a place that's in the story from Genesis 16. He goes back to a place where God who sees is. In other words, Isaac didn't just shoot out of the barn and go, "Hi, I'm Isaac, and I'm starting with a walk with God by myself. I've invented worship, and I know." He starts off on the shoulders of his God's work and the parents before him. Isaac was blessed by God. He had a walk with God. He went back to the place where there was a scene from Hagar's life. You remember? You remember the scene where in Genesis 16, the angel meets Hagar and says, "Hagar, who are you? Where are you going, Hagar? What are you doing?" "I'm running away from Sarah." "Oh no, go back." That's this place. He dwelt in the place where an angel had met Hagar earlier in Genesis 16. Now, it might be a place that was somewhat inhospitable, but to him it was a warm reminder of something God had done in the past. Here's the lesson. When you need to trust God for your future, you don't forget the past. You celebrate what God has done in the past so that God can show you what your future is. That's important. In a society that disses history, it has no idea what God has done. What we have are a group of people that are learning a history of America that is not about God and not about what God did. Do you know what William Bradford told us about the Pilgrim experience? Do you know that when the Pilgrims arrived at Plymouth Rock, and when they got there in the 17th century, in the 1600s, because of a brutal winter, they nearly died of starvation. And a group of them got together in an old, rounded-out hut that had been there from the Indians from years before. But the Indians had long since left. They didn't know, by the way, they died of a disease that was brought by the white man. They had no idea what happened to those Indians. But the Indians withdrew. And Bradford and his people came and they found some round huts and they inhabited them because it's cold out there, and if you can find a place to stay, you stay there. Well, they made their own houses, but one of these huts was a communal hut because it was very large. They weren't sure what the Indians had done with it. They got together and they held hands and they began to pray to the Lord Jesus to give them food because they were starving. And as they were praying, a man dropped to his knees and looked up to heaven. But when his knees hit the floor, he went through the floor and into a large basket of dried corn. That's a story you won't get in your school. You know why? Because it exalts Jesus Christ. When you extract from people the story of what God has done, you rob them of the power to move forward. Now, what's interesting is that when I read verse 19 and verse 20, I see that Isaac recognized the need for separation to God for the promises of the future. Let me say it this way. He says he became the father, Abraham became the father of Isaac. Isaac was 40 years when he took Rebekah, sister of Laban. He understood that he was to have purity in his line. So he chose his parents' choice for his spouse. Now, don't overplay this. I'm not telling you that your dad gets to pick your spouse. I happen to like that method, being a dad, but I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is Isaac respected what God was doing in his father in the choice of his wife. Because Isaac could have said, "I don't want her." He didn't go out and look around and choose the nicest looking girl. That's not how it happened. You remember the story of how Rebekah was chosen. This girl probably had biceps that would dwarf anybody in the room. The reality is, you could argue that he married her because he was scared of her, but I don't think that's the point. I think really what happened is Abraham went to great expense and great lengths to find somebody, and he treasured the purity of the line because he almost blew it in Sarah. And you remember the whole point of Rebekah was, don't you dare let him marry somebody from this land. You go and get somebody from the right background because there's a purity in the line that I'm trying to do. See, when God's word marks the boundaries in your life, then you start to preserve your future. And Abraham's desire from God to preserve the line was passed to Isaac, and he respected what he was given. Let me say it this way. God puts the boundaries on your life. God's the one who puts them there. So let me ask you in verse 20 to simply see that what he was doing was he was respecting the boundaries God put on his life. You don't respect the boundaries God puts on your life, you're going to change the story. That's what you're going to do. Let me give you one last one for Isaac. Look at 21. Isaac realized the truth of intimacy when he had to have intimacy with God when troubles came into his life. So in 21 it says Isaac prayed on behalf of his wife. He understood that when trouble rolled in and she was barren, he had to have intimacy with God. He had to talk to God about it. Because you're only going to grow by your intimacy with God. That's what's going to happen. By the way, it is counterintuitive. The whole world will tell you that you will grow without God on your own. In fact, they sort of lean into it by telling you this: get out from underneath your parents so you can grow up. But God's plan is actually that you grow up under them. That it's not distancing yourself so that you can make a name for yourself. It's you make a name for yourself by keeping yourself close, not by making a distance. Stop trying to be different than your parents. Stop trying to figure out if your mom likes it and, I shouldn't. Or they're so old school, I should always be telling them what they're doing wrong. Don't do it. Here's the thing. God really does give you the relationships that are good for you. Now, for some of you, you want to have a marriage that's exactly the opposite of the one your parents have. Because you have decided that they fight all the time and you don't want to do that. Okay. You learn something by watching somebody else, whether it's how to do it or how not to. You learn something, right? So here's what I want you to see. Why does he pray? Because he needs an intimate personal relationship with God, and God has said that Isaac would be blessed. Did Isaac think he wasn't going to have any children? No. Why would he know he's got to have kids? He understands the promise of God in his life. So here's what you can do. You can walk around strutting your stuff saying, I got the promises of God, so I don't even have to talk to God. I got the promises. And that's exactly the wrong way to act. The right way to act is because God has said these things, I will grow closer to him, not more self-dependent. Okay, let's talk Ishmael for a minute. 25:9 says, then the sons of Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah. I think it's kind of interesting that in the Arab and Israeli debates that go on, it's one of the warm moments is that when Abraham died, Ishmael came back from the land of the east and was there to bury his father. That is, in the moments of intimacy in their family, they laid aside their differences and they all stood together. And here you see in verse 12, these are the records of the generations of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar the Egyptian, Sarah's maid, bore to Abraham. These are the names of the sons of Ishmael. And he goes on and names them all the way down to verse 16. These are the sons of Ishmael, and these are their names by villages, by camps, 12 princes according to their tribes. These are the years of the life of Ishmael. 137 years he breathed his last and died and was gathered to his people. They settled from Havilah to Shur, which is the east of Egypt, as one goes on toward Assyria. He settled in the defiance of his relatives, that is, in the presence of or to the east of or before the face of his relatives. Ishmael learned to fit into the family in a unique way, because he was different than everybody else. I get a special appreciation for Ishmael because I was the kid that didn't stay home. All my brothers and sisters grew up in South Jersey. They went to the same colleges in New York, and they all got married and stayed right there. I went to college in Philadelphia and then got on a plane and left and went to Israel and lived in the Middle East. I was the one who didn't do it the way the other kids did. I'm not telling you to do that because it's a very lonely thing to do. I'm telling you that God has a plan for different kinds of kids, and they're not all the same. And so you might have that brother or sister who's the wandering one, okay? Ishmael is kind of like that. One of the things I appreciate about Ishmael, though, is in verse 9. He took responsibility for what was his to care for. Even though he was far away, he came back when his dad died. That is, he lived away, but when his father died, he made his way back. Now, the division of the family wasn't a divorce. It wasn't a rejection in the same way that we would view it today. It was a different time, and Ishmael had a different set of values, but he knew when to come home. If you put anything down on verse 9, it's he knew when to come home. Just because you're out on your own doesn't mean there's not times when you need to come home. Recently, one of my children at home was going through a very tough experience, and my daughter, who's far from home, who was out living on her own, knew that it was time to jump in the car and come and be with her sister. Why? Because you got to know when to come home. The second thing I would tell you is this. In verses 12 to 16, he did what he could, growing what was in his control instead of using his problems as an excuse. He did what he could. He had many children. He became the father of chieftains that lived out in desert camps, and he followed the pattern of life that his father carved out for him. Let me put it this way. He could have gone on and said, well, I didn't get what Isaac got, and so I'm a victim, and I'm going to sit here, and people need to send me checks. Instead, what he does is he says, okay, I'm living out here in the wilderness. I'll be a wilderness guy. I'll establish my life. Let me say it this way. I don't know what kind of parents you had. Stop making excuses and get on with your life. Become what you're supposed to become. Don't make excuses. Don't tell me about their lack of education. If you need one, get it. We happen to live in a time and place where you can. If the real problem is that your parents didn't give you what you think you were supposed to get, then get out and earn it. I don't know where everybody got the idea that somebody was supposed to hand it to them. That's not how the country was built. The other thing I'll tell you is in verses 17 and 18. Now, I need you to hear how I mean this. Ishmael was unique, but he was not disconnected. How many of you, do you have a brother or sister that's like, you would call them unique? Like, they're really different? Okay, don't point now. That's not nice. I mean, do you have one like that? And in their uniqueness, sometimes people start to license disconnectedness because they're unique. I'm the artsy one, so I don't hang out with anybody else. You know, I'm the musical one, so I don't hang out with all these Neanderthals that beat on Tupperware. They don't know how to do music or whatever. Here's the thing. What we have to do is flourish in our uniqueness, but connect to other people. I want you to be unique. I want you to express what God put in your heart to express, but I want you to do it in a way that's connected to other people. I would walk away from Ishmael going, he's a weird guy, he's a different guy, he lives in a different place, but he knew when to come home, he knew how to be connected, and he did what he could with the life that he was given. So I don't want you to go, Isaac good, Ishmael bad. That's kind of a flannel graph Christianity. The real story is that Isaac had some bad spots and Ishmael had some really good ones. Okay, let's move on to Rebekah so we can get quickly to our break. Rebekah is in 22 to 24. So 22 says, but the children struggled together within her, and she said, if it is so, why then am I in this way? And she went to inquire of the Lord. The Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb. 2 peoples will be separated from your body, and one people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. Verse 24, when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb. You can't exactly say it was a surprise since God told her there were twins in her womb. God had already seen the scan. Verse 27, Esau became a skillful hunter, middle of 27, a man of the field, but Jacob became a peaceful man living in tents. Now Isaac loved Esau because he had a taste for game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. We're going to come back and spend some time on that. But let's just look at Rebekah for a minute. First of all, she was under a misimpression in verse 22. What's the misimpression of Rebekah? She would fit right in with Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. What's her misimpression? She was doing good, but she was in pain. She was in pain. There was a big struggle, and she's going, I don't get it. You remember that a lot of young women, when they got pregnant, that was the symbol of when they were going to die. A lot of people didn't make it through childbirth. So she's having a struggle in her womb, and she's going, God, I thought I was doing what you want me to do. Why am I going through this? As if the notion is, if I walk with God, good things should come. That's the mistake. The fact of the matter is, yes, you're walking with me, but there's another part to this. You're not alone. There's two wrestling inside of you, and I'm working a plan with them, not just with you. I would say that one of the things she does is deals with God directly, and I like that. I like that she goes to God with her problem. She does not go to her husband. She goes to God with her problem. I think that's a really good point about Rebecca. I also think that she accepts God's answer. I think it's wonderful that she simply believed that God had a purpose in the trouble. The thing is that she did not understand what Jacob was becoming, and she turned him into a bit of a manipulator, and she was on the wrong side of this story later on. But in her beginnings, she accepted God's explanation. That there's a later story for Rebecca, so I don't want to tell too much of it now. Only this. Did you notice that at the end of our reading, the father loved one child, the mother loved the other? Whenever you see that, plan on that being a disaster. When you pick favorites among your children, plan on that living out in a disaster. It will. I think the problem is that you don't see each of them as unique. When you don't see the uniqueness inside the child. Whenever I go into a meeting, whenever I went into meetings with my kids' teachers, I would sit down with the teacher, and I would always wait until the teacher would tell me, I'd let them sort of do their spiel. Usually you get called into the teacher because there's something wrong. You know what I mean? And as a result, I'm waiting for what's wrong. But the teachers that I admired were the teachers that started off with, let me tell you a couple things about your kid that I just love. And then they'd go to, now we've got a problem in this area and we want to address it. The teacher that starts on what's wrong with my child has not established with me that they love my child. And I want to know you love them before I want to hear your insights about what's wrong with them. Because frankly, I don't care what you know until I know that you care about them. So the reality is that I come to the place where I'm listening for you love my child. The thing is, when you pick favorites, what you're telling the other one is that something's wrong with them in your eyes. And you don't want to do that. All right, let's move on. I want to get you to your break. So let's move to Esau very quickly. And Esau is the true value hardware man. Esau is the guy who learns what's truly important. He knows what the true values are. By the way, verse 25, the first came forth. This is in the birth process. The first one came forth what? Red. Admoni. It's the word for ruddy. It's the person that has the freckly, red-haired complexion. That's ruddy. And all over he was like a hairy garment. And they called him Esau. That's the word rough. They called him rough baby. Rough baby. And he comes out and he's red and hairy. Okay? Afterward, his brother came forth with his hand holding on to Esau's heel. So his name was called Yaakov. Yaakov, or Jacob, is the word trickster or heel catcher, or a guy who sticks his foot out when somebody's walking by. Okay? The guy who trips you up. Okay? Tricky. Mr. Tricky. And Isaac was 60 years old when he gave birth to them, meaning his wife gave birth to them. When the boys grew up, Esau became a skillful hunter. I've often wondered if maybe the animals came closer because he looked more like them. A man of the field. But Jacob was a peaceful man. Dee, 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 dee. You got Jacob, a little flute playing in the background, living in tents. Jacob was the interior decorator. Esau was the hunter. Bowie knife. So do we all understand completely what these two were like? If you looked at Jacob's hands, would you mistake him for Esau? No, he's the interior decorator. If you look at Esau's hands, you know that you don't want him hanging your wallpaper. Stick it on wall. you know? So they have very different characteristics. Now here's what I want you to understand. Isaac loved Esau because he had a taste for game. Stop right there. The father loved the son that gave the father what the father wanted. In other words, he was selfish in his love, self-oriented. And by the way, he measured his son the way most, ladies, this is the way most men measure their lives, by what they do. If you walk up to a man and you say, tell me about yourself. Well, I'm a plumber. He will tell you what he does, because that's how he thinks. His accomplishments are in what he does. Some of you are going to say, well, my dad wasn't that loving. Your dad drove out of the driveway every morning, went to a job, and when he looked in his rearview mirror and he knew that he had put a roof over your head and that the lights were on, he thought that was the only statement of love he had to make. Why? Because men measure life by what they accomplish. What did they do? And when they get to the middle of their life and the days ahead are growing smaller than the days behind, they go through a crisis of, did I accomplish what I thought my life would be about? And some of them live the glory days of their high school football career their entire life. There are some people that get in touch with me on Facebook, and it's scary to me, because they want to talk about high school like it's still where I live. I've moved on. I really don't think about high school all that much. But some people are still stuck in a moment in life that was formative to them. It's not wrong to have that life formative moment. It's wrong to live there for the rest of your life. You learn from it, then you grow through it. I think the other thing it says is that Jacob was a peaceful man living in tents. Which is the one who's living in the tent with Jacob that's going to be favoring to Jacob? So let's put mama's boy. He was a mama's boy interior decorator. And when Jacob had cooked stew, he's a cook. He's a chef. He's on, home and garden TV, explaining to you how to make whatever, or food television. Now see, this is the way you julienne the fries. Okay, this is what he's doing. I'm picking on him, but I'm going somewhere with this. Both of them are men. You don't have to be big, hairy, and look like Og, walking around dragging people by their hair behind you, to be a man. The problem isn't that he's an interior decorator or has soft hands or is a good cook. The problem is he learns one of the characteristics of the girls in the tent. Isaac loved Esau. Jacob cooked stew. Okay? Look at 29. Esau came in from the field and he was famished, and Esau said to Jacob, please let me swallow of that red stuff there, for I am famished. Therefore his name was called Edom, red. There's a point being made here. There's a little play on something. Edom is related, red is related to Admah, which is mud, which is related to the soil or the dust of the ground. It's also Adam, who was taken from the dust of the ground. He's saying Esau was about the earth. He was an earthy guy. He was all about the needs of this life. He lived everything toward the material and satiating his own pleasures and his own desires and getting it right now. And he says, Jacob says to him, well, first, sell me your birthright. A birthright is something ethereal, something not physical right now. It's something that's a concept. Some people are concrete, other people are concept. He goes, I'm hungry. What good is that going to do me? I might as well get my soup, because that's what I really need. And so he says, I'm about to die, so what is the birthright of use to me? And Jacob said, first swear it to me. So he swore it, sold his birthright to Jacob. Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and he drank and rose up and went on his way. Thus Esau, the word despised, bazal, is carelessly dispensed with. He carelessly dispensed with his birthright. You know why? Because he made a mistake. Zig Ziglar used to say it this way: the chief cause of failure and unhappiness is trading what you want most for what you want now. Trading what you want most for what you want now. He jumped the gun. He's a rough child, skillful hunter, earthy, pleased his father, but he treated something that was holy as something casual. What's holy about the birthright? What's holy about the birthright? What is the birthright? We're sitting here talking about it. Does anybody know what it is?
If you were the firstborn child, you had a larger piece of the inheritance.
Double portion of the inheritance, and you became the patriarch of the family. Now, about 50 million years ago, somebody made a very famous set of films called The Godfather. But it had that same idea. The patriarch of the family dies, and the oldest son takes the place. And the oldest son gives permission to his sisters to marry. He becomes essentially a stand-in father. The birthright was the symbol of God's promise to the next in the line. And so he handled something that was holy, but he handled it casually. I want to tell you something. You're going to see this as a motif or a picture in the Bible. Whenever you handle something God says is holy and handle it in a casual way, disaster approaches. See, Isaac understood how important it was to Abraham for the line to be passed well, right? It's interesting because Esau doesn't understand why it's important for the line to be passed well from Isaac. It should have been Abraham, Isaac, Esau. But Esau sold out that right to Jacob, so it became Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and that's the line of blessing. Well, we're going to take a break because I don't think we can get all the way through the end of Jacob because I want to come back and do that in a more thorough way. But I want you to understand something. Esau's life is a really interesting one. He looked at something that looked good and smelled good, and he was utterly deceived. Listen to Hebrews 12 for a minute. You might mark next to Esau's story, Hebrews 12, 15, and 16. Listen to these words. See to it that no one misses the grace of God and that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and defile many. See that no one is sexually immoral or godless like Esau, who for a single meal sold his inheritance rights as the oldest son. Literally, it says that you're godless when you take the holy thing that God has put in your life, the promise of God, and treat it casually. You don't understand who God is and what He's doing in your life. Don't forget that later on Esau's going to have a lot of problems as a result of this. Don't despise the blessings and promise of God in your life. I'm thinking about the Christian kid who comes from the good home and he's tempted to be casual with the blessing of having grown up in a godly home. Well, they just don't count that as anything. Do you all know kids like that? Because here's the thing. If you grow up in a home where there's like godliness, it's not cool. There's nothing cool about it. In every movie, the cool kid is the one who breaks the rules. He's the one everybody's focused on. That sort of James Dean character, that kind of rebel that's out there without a cause. The Christian kid that loves his parents and obeys them, they're never the cool person in the movie, ever. The thing is, they're the cool person in God's movie. And that's the thing you have to remember, because at the end of the day, what's going to happen is if we're casual with the blessing of God, we're going to miss out on the future of it.